Good morning, good afternoon. Can everyone see my presentation and screen? If possible, just let me know before I begin. It should be just the title page of this presentation. Yes, no, someone please let me know if you can see my screen just before I start. Yes, okay. Okay, well, I will get started. So thanks for everyone for joining. I think some folks might have been here or joining from the last panel discussion that I had a couple minutes ago with some other folks on user experience. So this is a presentation today talking specifically around product detail pages and how to think a little bit different about product detail pages. So the real key thing here that I want to discuss today is that we should really be calling them product experience pages and not product detail pages, because a product detail page really doesn't define what the customer is there for, right? They're there for an experience. They're there to make purchases or to find information. And I'm going to kind of walk you through a little bit today of how you can do that. I'll show you some examples of people who aren't doing it so well, which I talked about in the last panel discussion, and folks who are doing it well. And I'll give you some real specific things that you can take away today and actually do and implement within your business. So, looking forward to this presentation, and that's what we'll talk about today. So, very high level agenda here. Who I am and what I do. I'll talk a little bit about the product detail page history, which is something that's a very interesting. We'll talk about what changed, right? So, I'm telling you that product detail pages are dead. You're saying, okay, Justin, well, what changed? Why is it now a product experience page? I'll go through some of that. We'll talk about some of the product experience page strategies and how to implement those, as I just alluded to. And then about with 5 minutes left or so, I'll open it up to Q&A and see if there's anything specific that folks have that they want to ask. So with that, I'll jump into who I am. So nice to meet all of you. My name is Justin Racine. I'm a senior commerce strategist with Proficient. Proficient is a global digital consultancy agency. So we work quite a bit with big brands and mid-sized brands on a whole slew of different things, from e-commerce to order management to PIM to user experience, you name it. Anything that's digital, that's customer facing, we work on and help our clients implement. So a little bit about my history. So I've 11 years in e-commerce with 12 years in healthcare medical product space. So worked for some of the organizations that you see listed below here: Cardinal Health, Invacare, to name a few. So some large healthcare organizations where I held various different e-commerce roles within them, and then decided to move over to the consultant space last year. So been with Proficient for probably about a year and 3 months or so, which has been a great ride so far. So that's a little bit about me. I'm also a contributing writer for cmswire.com. So please definitely check them out, and some articles over there as well. There's a lot of great content on a whole slew of different topics. But let's get into the meat of why we're here today. So let's talk a little bit about product detail page history. So very interesting history. Some of the different dates I listed here are things that I thought were of interest. So in 1971, MIT students started selling marijuana through a product detail page, which quote unquote is the first time that something was sold via the internet, which, as controversial or not controversial as it is, was what happened. Fast forward to 1994, when a Sting CD was the first real product that was sold securely through the internet. So a little bit different of a product. And then, 1 year later, enter Amazon, right? We'll talk about them a little bit more later. as they sort of entered this space, and they've continued to evolve. In 2005, Amazon Prime launched. In 2010 to 2015, we had that social media boom, specifically within advertising, right? Where Facebook and Instagram and Twitter put forth a lot of advertising opportunities for brands to promote themselves or products through, which is a little bit of why things have changed to the product experience page. So we'll talk about that later. And then, the last point here that I really want to touch on is COVID is driving massive growth and disruption in e-commerce in general, but specifically in product pages, right? As COVID hit last year, customers and consumers started demanding different pieces of information that they never demanded before through these product pages, like inventory stock levels, and if something was out of stock, when it would be back in stock again. So there's been a progression of different reasons that people are using product pages, and different reasons why things have changed over the years. So a little bit of a history of where product detail pages have come from, and where we're at today. So the traditional approach to a PDP, and a lot of what I'm talking about here in a product detail page is in reference to what I described on the previous slide. This is what typically happens and what we typically see. There's an initial motive for why someone is looking to potentially redesign the page, right? So they need to re-platform their e-commerce website, right? Or they need to enhance the website and they want to make changes, or voice of the customer comes up and customers are complaining that they can't find specific pieces of information on this detail page, right? Something happens and that causes folks to want to rework and redo these pages. So once that does happen, what's the next step? Well, the platform selection and enhancement validation is the next step. So okay, you want to upgrade or change your platform. There's a ton of different vendors out there. How do you align each vendor based upon what your needs are as a business, but also what your customer needs are? What are the new features and workflows internally that are going to make sense for your stakeholders? So comparing the platforms and looking at what makes the most sense, right? And then implementation of that approach. So the site launches, new features are released, the product detail page, as you see it listed over here on the right hand side, is what was kind of coming out of box, as you might say, with the platform. So this is traditionally how we, and I've been guilty of it too, would approach building out product pages. And what I'm here to tell you is that this is wrong. This is the wrong way to approach a product detail page, and I would even argue it's the wrong way to approach commerce in general. This platform here, or this new, focuses in on what my opinions are, focuses in on what customers' opinions are, which is important, but it's only a small segment. And what we really want to do is to start with the data and analytics, which I'll talk about later, and show why that is so important in building out a product experience page. So let's dive in here a little bit to some examples, and talk a little bit more about what a product experience page is. This is a slide I love to use. So PDP versus PEP. What's the difference between a detail page, Justin, and an experience page? And this is a graphic I've used many times. So this is an elevator, right? This is a lift. On the left-hand side of the page here, it's functional, right? You can see the different floors that are listed, but it's not exactly intuitive and easy. The workflow kind of sucks. It's hard to find the floor that you want. Things aren't really organized in a way that is familiar to me, at least. So this is what a traditional product detail page is in my mind. Yes, there's an image. Yes, there's a description. Yes, there's an add to cart. There's a price. There's reviews. There's upsells. There's cross sells. There's all of that there, but is it aligned in a way that's intuitive? On the right here, you'll see that this is what a product experience page should do. It's progressional. You know exactly how to find your floor. It goes left to right. If you want to go to the parking floors, they're listed as P1, P2, P3. It's easy to find what you're doing. Both of these are functional. One's more intuitive to what human nature would be conducive for, which is on the right. And if you take nothing away from this presentation, this is how you should be thinking about your product pages today. Don't focus in on just using what's there because it's functional. Try to align it in a way that makes sense for your customers. So what changed, right? I mean, if we go back to this slide before, it can't just happen overnight that, people have these expectations of these buttons aligned in a nice, clear, concise way, right? So what actually changed? Well, there's quite a few things that did, but the biggest thing is the quote unquote, I want it now, where am I culture. So basically Steve Jobs, I'll use him as some different areas throughout this presentation, but he, this I want it now culture really kind of cultivated out of when the iPhone came into the market in 2007, right? Before that, you couldn't really use a device like you can an iPhone to do, complex things like browse the internet. So when this actually entered into the space and it came out, new retailers also came out as well too, right? People said, okay, well, I can sell things online, but I can also sell things through a mobile device. Fantastic, right? So consumers began to experience new purchasing workflows, um, helping to develop their expectations for all future purchases. So, this iPhone comes out, you have different ways that you can navigate through and find products, and competitive markets drive better experiences. So the introduction of this phone really kind of created out the "I want it now" culture. It gave people the flexibility to purchase from a mobile device, and because of that, people had expectations of what experiences should be like going forward. So, what does that mean in the power of choice? So, if you were on the panel discussion previous to joining this, I talked a little bit about this and teed it up, but there's a real power of choice that's out there now. And I'll go through some of these bullets here on the right, but customers are really in control of their own destiny, right? And your option as a retailer is really to put your brand out there in the best possible way, right? Folks are less reliant today on customer service reps. It's more of a self-service avenue, and they have multiple shopping options. So people are shopping online in a lot of cases because they don't want to go to a store to buy something, or they don't want to call someone up to do that. They want to self-serve, they want to do it on their own and by themselves, and they have higher expectations, right? There's new generations of consumers are entering the market. There's kids out there who grew up with an iPhone from age 3 or 4, right? They're playing games on there. The parents have educational games or educational apps on their tablets. So there's these new generations that are coming into play that are growing up, and they're being developed with these mindsets and expectations of extremely great experiences, right? So it's creating that instant culture shift and pushing it even further. And customers want better experience. I listed the last point here. Better user experience equals more revenue for your company, and I'll prove it to you, because on the left hand side here of this page, or this slide, you'll see that some of the research that PwC has done has said that 86% of buyers will pay more for a better customer experience. So let's think about that for a second. You can sell your products for more money than your competitors and not compete on price because you're creating an experience that's better than your competitors. That's a powerful statement, because competing on price is something that everyone struggles with, and you don't have to do it anymore, right? If you can create an experience that's so substantial and so in line to what your customers' expectations are, they're not going to shop anywhere else. I can tell you that right now, and this research proves and shows that. So, what should you start to look at doing, and what are some companies out there that might be doing this well, right? So the innovate or die, right? What is the cost of doing nothing, and how does this all relate to product pages on your site? Let me explain. So I listed here, out of box isn't always the answer, which is the OOB. And what that means is that if you're working with a vendor, and the vendor, I won't name anyone on this call, but if you have vendors who are e-commerce applications, right? It's a site that you can use that has e-commerce features that you can work with, someone like a Proficient or someone else to actually implement. They come with a lot of native features there. So a lot of the product pages will have an area for you to upload an image, or to put in your product description, or to have the add to cart button. All great things, all needed for e-commerce. But the way that they're aligned is not necessarily the best way that they should be for your business. It might be, but it may not be. So the traditional product detail page layouts, they more or less look the same. Your customers' needs, though, are unique, and platforms that put and build these things out are general, right? So they're doing and following best e-commerce practices, which is great, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's best for your business. And that's what I really want to drive home here, is that customer expectations and experiences are the answer. So the way that you start and do this, which is these 3 points here, is the analytic and KPI review, the voice of the customer and voice of the employee, and then the platform extensions off of that. And we'll talk through some of those a little bit later, but I did want to tease those there as I show you some examples and we talk through a little bit further some different use cases here. So with that said, let's look at some good examples of people who are doing it not so well and people who are doing it pretty well, right? From a product experience page or a product detail page. And I'll probably catch a lot of unpopular opinions here, but I'm going to show it anyways. I think Amazon is a real bad example of a product detail page. I wouldn't call it a product experience page. Amazon, and I'm not trying to, just dump on Amazon here, right? They're a truly innovative company. They've done a lot of great things, but I think they could do better in some areas. And the reason I say that is that Amazon has the luxury that they've been around for a very long time. With that, they've developed a ton of brand loyalty and affinity. You can't go anywhere without someone knowing who Amazon is. And that luxury has allowed them to keep their product pages more or less the same over the years, simply because of the fact that they know people are going to go there and use them, and people know where things are on the page. The add to cart is always over on the right hand side, a little ways down. The reviews on the page are at the bottom of the page where the upsells and cross sells are. They've gotten away with it because of the simple fact that they're Amazon, right? And because of that, we as consumers have been intuitively trained and habitually know where to find things on the page just from us using it over and over and over again. But that doesn't mean that it isn't a bad example of how a product page should be laid out. So, excuse me, there are good elements to it. But I think there's people who are doing it a little bit better. And I'll show you one here. This is what I see as a good example, Bonobos, which is a primarily men's clothing brand that was started over here in the States. And they do a great job of making this page functional, right? So a lot of what they've listed here, from the product name, the price, they have the different color options for these pants. They list the different waist sizes that are down here as well. They have the different fits that are listed here. So it's a very functional product experience page, right? People who are going here, more than likely, they may go to purchase this in store, or they may go to or they may be coming here primarily to purchase online. But the page itself is very functional. The description of the pants isn't overly long. If you do want to find that, you can find it further down in more detail. But the primary purpose here is for the user to be able to pick the different attributes, pick the different sizes, and actually make a purchase. And the sizing piece of this is another component that's interesting as well, right? So I know what my size are for pants, but it fluctuates by brand. So this Bonobo site actually gives you the ability to see how their pants fit, right? They have pants length over here on the left-hand side, the different fits that are available. It's a functional page, and it's in line with what their customers' expectations are, right? People are coming here, they want to buy pants. What are the top concerns that people have when they buy pants? Do I like the color? Is it going to fit, right? What is the price? And what are the different variations? And this page gives all of that, right? If you have questions on sizing, it's going to tell you what the different fits are and how their pants fit in size. If you want to see the different colors, you can click on the different color here, and the product image here will change as well, so you can see what the pants look like. Additionally, they also match any of the pants that are here with complementary items like this shirt. and look good together. So the page itself is very functional. So this is a great example of someone doing a product experience page that, in my opinion, is in line with customers' expectations. So with that said, how do you start and how do you build this product experience page compared to whatever the product detail page is that you might have today? And how can you begin this process of transitioning from the traditional approach to this new approach that I'm proposing here of this product experience page? Produce, typo. Um, and this is how you do it. So my opinion in this doesn't matter. I can't sit here and tell you that you should make your product page look how Bonobos made theirs look, because that's my opinion. I'm giving an example of a site I think is good, but my opinion doesn't matter here. It does in a sense because I have experience, and everyone attending this, I'm sure, has experience as well in commerce or user experience. But what I think looks good only applies to me as a customer and what is in my historical experiences. Tribal knowledge is helpful, but the real key here is looking at the mixing pot of art and science. And I'll explain what that means. So the science here is the data and analytics that you have around your business. If you're selling something online today, and you have an e-commerce website, then you have data of what pages are converting, what pages are not converting, what products are converting. I mean, you have every piece of information you could possibly want to set this up, and actually know the data behind it, which will lead you to the art or the creative. So I can't sit here and tell you to lay your product pages out a certain way. There's good best practices, but the data and analytics of your business is going to be the compass of success for experience for you and your customers. Use the data and the analytics to drive what the art or the creative is. If you see that, a lot of people are on your product pages, but they're not really adding the upsell or cross-sell items, look at the data and see, is that really true? Is that showing through? Okay, why could that be? Well, are they buried at the bottom? Yes, they are. Do people scroll down there? No, I guess they don't. What are some possible solutions to rectify that? Well, you could move the product upsells to the top of the page. You could add and take just those upsell, cross-sell products from that product page and bring it to the cart. You could use a modal pop-up when someone adds something to the cart and say, hey, before you check out, would you like to add these accessory items, right? So use the data and analytics to lead and guide the creative. And we'll talk about this in greater detail on this next slide. So when you start with this process, you want to start first, though, before you get into the data, with the voice of the employee and the voice of the customer. So what this means is, and just so that everyone can see, the analytics and KPIs will be step two. But the reason that the voice of the customer and voice of the employee are first is that I want you to get unbiased feedback and unbiased opinions before you look at the data. And there's an important reason for that. The reason is that if you look at your data and analytics first, it's going to lead you down a path, and you might ask leading questions to your employees or customers that is based upon your assumptions that you've made. I'd rather you start with your employees and your customers first, get their raw feedback, and then validate that against what the analytics and data is saying. So look for the positive and negative trends within commerce if you are within, an e-commerce site. It also applies as well if you're not. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. I see that there's a question that came in that I'll hit at the end. So compare some of your historical data as well too. Look at what people are saying now versus what they're saying maybe a year ago, right? And how is that changing? How have you changed the platform, right, since in over a year, whatever the time frame is? And how is that voice of the customer, voice of the employee changing things as well? So as you go through this, develop the baselines, but then look for pivots as well. So, leverage that VOE and VOC feedback, and align them to what you might see as some of the new features or business goals for these product pages. So that is one. This is the key thing to start with, is to really look at the voice of the employee and voice of the customer, which will tee into the next piece here. Is validating in the analytics and the KPIs, right? So, a lot of the baselines here are going to be the same, but it's the different avenue that you're working in. So, once you get some of that voice of the employee and voice of the customer information, look at your data then and see if it makes sense. If you're hearing a lot of customers say things like, your site's really functional, but when I get to that product page on your site, it's really hard for me to find, some PDFs or additional pieces of information. Okay, well, that's helpful. Let's look at the analytics and KPIs. Have a lot of people downloaded them? No, I guess they haven't. So it does hold true, and it does pull through this entire process. So once you're able to validate that, what's the last step? Okay, well, do we need to extend the platform, or should we look at building upon it, right? So can the platform that I'm using today do what I'm seeing in the voice of the customer and voice of the employee? Can it do, and extend out to create these new experiences based upon what I'm seeing in the analytics? And if it can, great. But if not, you might have to go through this process of validating the platform. If it can't meet, the current needs that you have, and you can't, leverage some of the native features that are there for foundational extensions, then you might have to plan to look at something else. And that's what I'm sort of suggesting here. So if you do, look at how you might need to plan and build that out. So determine for what the MVP should be for each of these product experience pages. So based upon what the data told you and what your customers told you, how can you put something out there in an MVP type format that's going to hit most of what your customers' needs are, right? And how does that timing and planning work as well too for the future phases? So, when within the commerce space, we like to plan for MVP for launch, but what does phase one look like? What does phase two after look like? And some of that you won't necessarily know at the start. You might have to launch your MVP, see how your customers react, and pivot. You can only get so much information up front. And that's just an inherent nature of commerce and any website experience, that you might think that you know, and you get all the information, you do all your data mining and your analytics and all of your voice of the customer conversations, but it doesn't necessarily play out the way that you might think, and you might have to pivot. So that's one piece as well that to keep in mind as you move forward. And then the last piece here, and I touched on this in the last session, the last panel that we had, which is a really great conversation, is that you all tracking and iterations. E-commerce in general and anything digital is a journey that never ends. It's like the universe. It's always expanding. It never holds the same shape. So you always want to be tracking your customer feedback, your employee feedback, and implementing survey touch points throughout the process, so that you can track that what they're saying and what the dialogue is, so that you can continuously plan and evolve the platform as you move forward. Because the approach of starting a project, building out a new product experience page, or replatforming your site, and then just letting it go is not a viable solution, because your customers are constantly being exposed to new experiences, and that's driving their new baseline expectations. So you do need to be continuously improving and evolving the platform to hit some of that. So after you're live and you've launched your new product experience page and you've built it out the way that you want, how does this post-launch reaction and tracking look, right? So this is what I was just alluding to. Commerce is a endless journey. So this chart on the left here really dives into the I would say typical customer journey, right? Customer has a need, and I apologize if this is a bit small. I did upload this PDF, so hopefully folks can download it after, if they'd like. But customers have a need, right? The customer needs to buy a product, or there's some sort of dissonance that occurs, and they have a need for something, right? They search, they find, they navigate to your site. They try to find the products or services that they're looking for. They land on this product experience page. They say, okay, these are the right pants. I want them in blue. This is the size I need, and then they make a purchase, hopefully, right? And then after they've made that purchase, they will move into actually using the product, right? And depending on what business you're in, the product life cycle could definitely change and has different time frames, but they're going to use the product, right? And hopefully, what you can do is retarget them with content as they're using the product. So, if I bought a pair of pants, like we were talking about earlier from that Bonobos site, maybe I need socks, or maybe I need a shirt, or maybe I need a belt, right? So, retargeted content and retargeted information throughout the process to try to get folks back to make a purchase is huge. And again, that leads into the customer need. So your role in this is to develop these product experience page in such a way that the consumer has such a good experience the first time that when you do get over here and you start to retarget them, that experience sticks with them and they say, you know, I bought pants from them. It was really easy. I had different sizes. I had different fits that they told me about. They showed me what different colors look like. And it was a really easy experience and I enjoyed it. So when content comes in that you're retargeting them on with whether it be socks or belts or whatever the upsells are that you're looking to do, they're going to remember either consciously or unconsciously that, oh, you know what? That Bonobo site, was a good experience. Yeah, I will go buy socks. That's the secret sauce here, right? You want to dazzle the customers with such a great experience that when they do purchase with you, that like we saw in one of the earlier slides, right? They're going to come back and do it again because it was so intuitive and it met and exceeded their expectations. And we know from that slide on the research that 86% of folks will spend more on a good experience. So that's really what the secret sauce is here. So again, just some bullets here. I kind of covered a lot of these already, but make sure that you're building out new user stories based upon feedback that you're getting, and develop different release features and iterations as well too. So as you start to launch these product experience pages out there, again, making sure that once you put it out there for the world to see, the journey isn't over. It's really just starting because you're going to continue to iterate and build off of that. And I also want to be clear too, I'm not suggesting that you go out and re-platform today. What I am saying is that if you have a platform that does have some features that you can extend or make your own in a way that is relevant for your business, you should totally do it. And there's a lot of great platforms that allow you to do that. And that could be a good approach. But if there's other areas of your business outside the product pages that it would be beneficial to re-platform and pick a different vendor, then that might be something that you do want to look at as you potentially move forward in this space. So with that, I only have 2 slides left here, and I'll probably go through them in 3 minutes or so, which will leave us a little bit more than 5 minutes for Q&A. So, and I do see that I will answer that one question that came in, but if there's others that you folks have, definitely throw them in the chat here. But I always like to end with a meme, so I put in this "Thank God it's over," even though it wasn't too long of a presentation today. But some final thoughts here are, really focus in on the data and what the customers are telling you. I try to drive home that data point in this presentation a lot because it's really important. I think a lot of times folks might build new experiences based upon tribal knowledge, which isn't a bad thing because there are some inherently good things there. But each business is different, and customer needs are unique. So focusing in on your business and your business data and analytics is going to help you create the right experience for you, not for anyone else, right? It's specific to your customers and what their needs are. The second final thought here is making customers a part of this process. So um, I talked about the voice of the customer importance earlier, but take it a step further. As you're building out these new product experience pages, work with your customers, bring them into working sessions. If you have mock-ups or wireframes, share them with the customers that are giving you feedback and allow them to make iterations on that. Why? Well, it'll make the pages better, but also by making them part of the process, you will strengthen your relationship with that customer, and your brand affinity and loyalty will increase as well because the customers feel that they were a part of the process, which they were, and they're going to come back and purchase more. And the last point here is never stop iterating on your product experience pages. So, as I had alluded to, it's a never-ending process, and they're constantly changing and evolving. We saw with COVID, right, and coronavirus, that new experiences were needed. People, when they were buying online, not only wanted to know if the product was in stock, but if it was out of stock, they wanted to know when it would come back in again so that they could go out and purchase it. We saw a huge shift, especially with our clients at Proficient, from a buy in store to a buy online, pickup curbside. We've worked with quite a few clients to iterate and evolve their business there. So, adding on product experience pages, the ability to select the storefront that you want to drive up and pick up curbside is a new iteration on that product experience page that came out of coronavirus. So there's constantly things that are going on in the world that are positively or negatively causing change in effect on these product pages, and you have to be in tune with them. So that's the final point that I think is important here. And then this is the final slide of the presentation, and I see there's some questions in here that I'll hit. So I'm going to quote Steve Jobs here again, and this is one of the best quotes I think he's ever had. He fielded this as a question during one of his presentations, and this is something that I take into pretty much everything that I work on, is that you have to really start with a customer experience and work backwards to the technology. What are your customers looking for? What are your customers' needs? What are their expectations? And building that into an experience and formulating it out, and then figuring out how the technology will enable you to do that. This is such a great quote, and if you take nothing else away from this presentation, take this quote away as how you should think about your product experience pages, but how you should think about your business in general around creating good experiences. So I will leave you with that, and I do see that there are some questions coming in. So I'm going to take a quick sip of water and hit some of these. Okay, so the first question that came in earlier is how much of this applies to service pages? And if you're talking service pages around the standpoint of non-e-commerce, where people are just looking to interact with a maybe not a product page, but a informational page about a doctor's office or about a specific retail location, it's important. And because there's different levels of conversion, right? In e-commerce, we think of conversion a lot around adding an item to the cart and making a purchase. But in other businesses, a service page could be filling out a form, right? Or entering a piece of information. So I would say it applies very much, and you could definitely use the same formula here to hit some of that. The next question is, do you have any data of performance PDP versus PEP? Maybe you did some A/B tests. Yes. So there is one client that I have worked with that had product pages set up differently, where, excuse me, initially we wanted to focus in, excuse me, on more upsells and cross sells and getting more ancillary products loaded in there. So we formulated not only where those products were on the page. So, traditionally they're hit at the bottom. So we looked at moving them up, but we also brought them into the cart page. And we also brought them into, or excuse me, I should say, we changed how those products were displayed. So, traditionally, upsell, cross-sell items are displayed based upon things that people previously looked at or things that are purchased together, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they correlate to the categories of products. So we focused in on correlating certain categories together as part of upsell cross sells, rather than just looking at products that were purchased together that really didn't make sense, right? Like if someone's buying Q-tips and a electric shaver together frequently, there's no categorical alignment there. It just happens that way. But focusing in on someone buying an electric shaver and post shave shaving, lotion makes sense. So that is one example of where we did leverage that. And I can follow up after this with some detailed statistics on how it went, because I see there's some other questions coming in. So do you think e-commerce sites like Amazon, eBay train the consumer mind too much with the standard layout? Yes, I do think for sure that Amazon 100% has paved the way, so to speak, on creating what the traditional product experience or product detail pages look like. That being said, consumers' expectations are constantly changing, and if there's one thing I can tell you about anything in innovation is that you must constantly be continuing to innovate off of what you've created. And people are doing it, like we saw with Bonobos, better. And I can guarantee you that people buying on Bonobos site have a better experience buying pants or anything for that matter than they do on Amazon. So I do believe that a lot of it, but I believe that we as practitioners in this space have an opportunity to actually push the envelope further, and by doing so, I think over time we will win more customers away from folks like Amazon. Um, let's see. Is there anything else that I missed any in here? Someone said, can you share with us a little bit of your PEP experience in the healthcare field? What's important there? Sure. It depends. Healthcare is a great example, and I'll explain why. People who are buying in healthcare, specifically, and I talked about this before, so I apologize if this is sort of some regurgitation, but you have different people in the healthcare space, right? You have people who have clinical backgrounds and you have people who have business backgrounds who are making purchases. If you're at a hospital, you might have a business manager who is buying a lot of the medical products. You may also have a doctor or a nurse or someone with a clinical background making purchases as well. They're two different personas. How do you service both of them through a product experience page that aligns, right? If you start talking about clinical information and application of surgical tools to someone who's a business manager, they're not going to understand it. It's not going to help them purchase it. But it's important to talk about those things with a clinical person or a doctor, right? So you have to focus in within healthcare to align those experiences through technology. So again, that you have multiple different personas using the site. So that's the experience. How does technology align to that? And the way that I would describe it is that there's different platforms out there, content management platforms that can be used in conjunction with a commerce platform to develop a personalization or personalized experience where when that business user authenticates or gets to the site, they're going to be presented with content that's business level, right? That not all of the details. Whereas a clinical person, when they get to that site and they actually log in and authenticate, they're going to have all the clinical trial information, how to use the surgical scalpel the right way. There'll be graphic images that they can look at of the product in use. So you can use technology in healthcare as an example to build out experiences based upon the different personas that you have, which is another important thing here too. And your data and analytics will tell you that if you have multiple personas, regardless of what business that you're in, you have to make sure that those product experience pages and your site in general is able to meet all of those expectations. And if it can't with one single instance or one single view, you have to look at the personalization options that are out there to make sure that you're hitting each of the personas that you have. So I would say that that is definitely an important piece for this as well. I see that there's 20 seconds left, so I know I'm going to get cut off here. I want to thank everyone for attending and joining here. I did upload these slides, so hopefully you can download them. I attached down here my email as well as my Twitter handle as well. Feel free to connect with me offline here if there's other questions or you want to dive into further. I'd be happy to do so. So again, thank you for attending, and I appreciate that came in here, and my hope is that you learned something today that you didn't know, or more importantly, that this presentation allowed you to just think a little bit differently about your business, about your product experience pages, and how to potentially move forward. So start with a customer experience and work back to technology, and you'll be good. So thank you all for the time. Please feel free to reach out if you have further questions after this, and enjoy the rest of the Digital Marketing Europe conference. Thank you.